Welcome to the Currency of Grief, the podcast where we confront two of society's most taboo topics, death and money. My name is Justin Weidenfeld, and I'm here to serve as your grief financial officer, guiding you through the complex and emotional journey of what happens when money and mortality collide. Whether you're navigating the aftermath of losing a loved one, looking for practical advice on handling pre- and post-death planning, or simply just wanting to start those hard conversations about legacy while you still can, this space is for you. Together, we'll hear real-life stories from real-life people who have navigated the intersection of grief and money and come out the other side. Our guests will share their stories, practical insights, valuable advice, and moments of clarity so that none of you have to navigate this alone. I'm grateful you've decided to join us on this journey. Now let's dive in. So without further ado, let's meet our guests for today's podcast. I'm humbled and honored to be in the virtual studio with Sarah Kagan. Sarah, first and foremost, is a mother of two, as you can tell by her background. More recently, though, Sarah is the founder of Keriah, Grief Coaching, which stemmed from when her mom got sick. When Sarah went back to work, instead of being faced with love and compassion, she was faced with feelings of disconnection and misalignment. She left her corporate job to start Keriah, a space where grief is spoken, seen, and supported when it feels too heavy or too scary to carry alone. Through group coaching, workshops, and grief education, Sarah helps people who are tired of carrying their grief in silence and build lives shaped by loss, but not defined by it. So obviously, from that intro, it's evident why I asked Sarah to be on the podcast. But Sarah, thank you so much for joining me on the Currency of Grief today.
Justin, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm looking forward to this.
I'm so excited to have you, and I know many people are excited to listen to this episode. But when we first connected on LinkedIn, what made you want to reach out, and generally, like, why did you want to come on the podcast?
I actually don't even know if I've told you this, Justin, but I think you were in the first 5 people that I connected with when I was like even considering taking a step into the world of grief and like working with grief, talking about grief. Like you had mentioned, I quit my job pretty suddenly, i.e. on the spot, because I just couldn't be there anymore after going through loss and feeling like I was in a culture that didn't support me and what I needed and really like the humanity of grieving. I quit, and I was originally thinking like, maybe I'll just take some time, decompress. I had just had a baby. I had lost my mom. Like it was a lot going on. And then I had just had this thing like in the background, and I just couldn't stop thinking about grief and how grief is formed in culture, the way we talk about it. And I was on LinkedIn, and for some reason, your profile came up as like DM me for access to some PDF or something. And I was like, oh, okay, great. And then we DM'd a little bit, and then there were like a bunch of connections with experience camps and a couple of other things. And we started chatting, and that was like, I think honestly, like day 3 into my, maybe I'll work in grief journey.
That's so funny.
So when you told me you had a podcast and now it's been, a bunch of months later, it just feels like fate, kismet.
Definitely. Yeah, it was the grief tax report that I took from a company called Empathy. And that tax report talks about the physical, emotional, and financial tax left on caregivers and the people who are left to settle someone's affairs. And it sounds like it resonated with you.
Yeah, it did. It did. Especially as I started to think about, like, my experience was really, the foundation of it was being in a corporate environment that just like did not know what they were doing or didn't know how to support someone who was grieving. And so there was a lot of information in there around like employee productivity and what it means to like care for employees as they're going through loss. And then Empathy, obviously being a company that's really built on like caring for people and bringing like that humanity side to work. And so it really was like exactly what I had been looking for and thinking about.
It's one of the major benefits of social media. We can talk about the cons all day, but it led me to you, and I'm super grateful for that.
Yeah, totally.
And I want to dive into your work post loss and making that move, that transition, and what spawned it. But first and foremost, on the currency of grief, we don't hold back. We dive in pretty quickly.
Great.
And so tell us a little bit about your grief story and a little bit about
Yeah. So my grief story is about my mom. My mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in May of 2023. We had lost my grandmother, her mom, to pancreatic cancer. So we were pretty clear on like what that was going to look like and what that would mean. Anyone who knows pancreatic cancer knows the outcomes are not good, and the course of treatment is typically quite short. So during the 8 months that she was having treatment, I got pregnant. I was working full time. And then I was her primary caregiver because my parents lived 10 minutes away. We were very close. And then when my mom passed away, I took 5 days off work because I was pregnant, had this big maternity leave coming up, like had a lot of guilt and shame around like needing 2 leaves. And then when I went back to work, not a single person at the company that I was at the time acknowledged my mom's passing. And that was such like a heavy burden for me to carry because it made me feel like grieving in general was a burden and not something that I could like do openly, which is just a really big weight to bear. And I had gotten, there were all sorts of other things that had happened in that journey that just really made me feel like being a bereaved person was like an unsafe way to show up and still be taken seriously as a professional. So I really like pushed it down as much as I could, showed up, like what was expected of me, had my son, had a very hard time postpartum, dealing with postpartum and grief just 3 months after my mom had passed away. And it was just a really hard journey. There were a lot of like competing emotions and feelings, and it was hard. I wanted to care for myself, but I had a newborn who also physically needed me. And I'm used to being a high performing, high achieving, high functioning person. And when you throw all those variables in and you're like, I actually can't like perform at that level at this moment, that also like questions of self, identity, all of that. So I went back to work and I was in my job for another 6 months before I really reached a point where I was just like, I cannot show up here anymore and ignore the parts of myself that have been ignored for the last 18 months as I've been like trying to continue to be this high performer, high functioner and not be a griever. And so one day I quit on the spot and was just like, I can't do this anymore. And then that's what led me to start Keriah grief coaching and the journey that I've been on since then. But it really was like, I couldn't not face it anymore, I think is a big part of like the story for me.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit more about, well, first off, thank you for sharing your story and talking about your mom. What was her name?
Paula.
Amazing.
We named my second son's name is Pierce, and he's named in honor of her.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Thank you.
So sounds like your mom lived very close to you.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about the family dynamics, and was your dad in the picture? How many siblings do you have? And what was your role like as a caregiver?
Yeah. So my parents were still together. They've been married like 40 years. Again, they live like 10 minutes away, but I have 3 brothers. So I'm the only daughter, which automatically like made my mom and I have a pretty unique bond, but we were also very similar in a lot of ways. And we worked together for 3 years in Philadelphia. So we worked in person, this was pre-pandemic. We worked in person for 3 years. And so I spent a lot of time with her in a professional setting and also in a personal setting. I've shared in her eulogy how actually working with her was like such a special experience that most kids don't get to have, because my mom and we worked in different parts of the business. It was a relatively large company, but there were times where we would be in meetings together and she was an executive and people would be like, oh, I'm trying to get time on like Miss Sunshine's calendar, or like Paula told me she really, like I could see the reverence that people had for her. And then I would go into her office and we would shut the door and we'd be like online shopping, so I got to see like such a full picture of who my mom was and the way that people like respected and admired her really up close, which really just made for like such a richness in our relationship. And when my mom got sick, I was also the only one who lived in Philadelphia at the time. So I was over at their house probably 3 days a week. Typically, I would bring my laptop and work from their house and just spend time with her. She was getting pretty aggressive chemotherapy. And so it was a lot of just like hanging out for the most part. There wasn't a lot to do necessarily, but it was more like emotional support and just spending time together because we spent a lot of time together anyway. And my brothers came in and out when they could. Everyone tried to be here as much as they could. And my dad took her to all of her appointments. My dad was a very strong caregiver for her. But I was the other person who was like there and in it most of the time.
Yeah. So what did you do in those downtimes? Was it conversations? Did you talk about life? Did you talk about work? Like, was she still working at the firm or had she?
No. Ironically, my mom retired about 5 months before she got diagnosed because my dad is 9 years older than her. And so they were like, let's just call it. And my parents love to travel. And so they had big plans of traveling the world and like doing all the things that they loved to do previously. And that obviously didn't happen. But what were the times like? That's a great question. But honestly, they were, and I mean this with like so much love, but they were unremarkable. And I think that is a really important thing that I didn't really expect. And I don't think a lot of people understand. When you see grief in movies and on TV, it's all these families having these like big, heartfelt, beautiful conversations, right? It's like these hallmark moments, right? That was not my family. And not in a bad way. It just was like we were spending time together. My mom taught me she taught me to crochet. So that was a thing we did together for a while. I told her, like, I would just tell her about the kids. I was pregnant, so complained about being pregnant a lot.
Girl talk.
Right, exactly. I was working, so like I would be over their house, and which was also a very interesting experience because I would be sitting with my mom who like was dying. And then I would go in the other room and I'd be like, hey, everyone. Oh my God, great PowerPoint. Like that code switching, like that though, was really wild. I would cook for her. Sometimes I would get her to like run errands with me. But it was honestly all the same stuff that we always did, except she was sitting on the couch.
Mm-hmm. So, and you worked remote for the most part? Okay.
Yeah.
So what was both before and after, like what was the hardest thing that you had to deal with, or what were the hardest things that you had to deal with emotionally during that time?
Something interesting is I think that I had a lot of anticipatory grief in the time that my mom was sick. I was very aware of the fact that she was dying. And I think being pregnant also made me very aware of like what she would be missing. Like there was a whole new life that was coming that she likely would not meet. And so the before, and this sort of goes back to what I was saying about those conversations being unremarkable. I had a big desire to have more of those conversations, like that you see on TV, those like heartfelt lessons, memory, like things you kind of take with you conversations. But the rest of my family didn't really have that desire. So I was doing a lot of anticipatory grieving and a lot of like knowing and being pretty grounded in what was coming privately because my family wasn't really having those conversations particularly openly. And so I think then after she passed away, part of what was really challenging was, everyone was in a different place in their grief, which everyone will be anyway. But that was it was really interesting. Like we were just in different places and we had different responses to that, which is really challenging. And I think the other thing that was challenging in the after was, for anyone who's been a caretaker, you know that so much of your time is occupied caretaking. Your literal time and your mental space and your emotional time is spent thinking about what's happening, anticipating needs, like being sort of a slave to your cell phone, never wanting to miss a call, the shuffling back and forth between houses. And when someone passes away, all of that stops immediately. And that's a big void. Then you layer in the void of not having that person. And there's a lot of emptiness, and thinking about how do you fill that again, and not having anything that you want to fill it with was really challenging in the immediate after.
Yeah. And even though those times may have been unremarkable, those were still very meaningful times.
Totally.
And so to then fill it with, scrolling on Instagram or really nice PowerPoints, it may not provide you the same meaning as that time, and you're not going to get it back. So I have two questions.
Yeah.
Do you want to comment on that?
Well, yeah, I was going to say that even knowing that my mom was going to die, when I go for walks, she was always the person I would call. And that was true while she was sick, and that was true before she was sick. And so that was another one of those things where it was I guess I could go for a walk. And then you go for a walk and you're like, well, this walk sucks. I actually don't want to be out here walking in silence by myself. This is just making me sad. And it's another one of those, you knew what was happening, you knew what was coming, but then the emptiness of the after is a lot more omnipresent than you realize it will be.
Yeah. Maybe instead of walking, you can go to one of those places where you smash plates and take
Dude,
all your...
I would love to.
So you mentioned that your family wasn't in necessarily a place to that, just to have those big conversations. So that just wasn't something that you guys did, which is normal. And so if you were to go back, was there any type of conversation that you wish you would have had in that pre-grief stage?
Yeah, great question. This is something I have thought about a lot, and something that I would tell anyone who's in a caregiving role or is in, a position where they know someone's going to pass. I really avoided having the conversations that I knew would make my mom uncomfortable, because I was trying to respect, she was the one who was dying. That's so much as an individual, a wife, a mother, a person to carry and process. And so I tried really hard to respect and let her guide. But the truth is that you are the one who is left. And so if there are things that you want, for me specifically, I really wanted my mom to write me a letter. And I never asked super directly, because I could tell that she didn't want to think about that. And so I never did. And now I don't have one. And it's such a loss for me. Because when the end came, it came so swiftly. And so her transition to hospice was very quick and all encompassing. And there wasn't time when we could all sort of say okay, there's no other perspective to have. We know this is the end. There wasn't any opportunity to have those conversations at that point. She couldn't do it anymore. And so I don't think it's one specific conversation I wish we had had, but there were needs or wants that I had that I did not advocate for, because I was, trying to make her comfortable. And as the person who's left, I wish I had advocated for what I would eventually want more.
For sure. I think that's super important, because, and was there a world where your mom would have been no, that's uncomfortable for me, I'm not going to write you a letter?
No, she honestly, if anything, she either would have done it, or she would have been I'll get to it. I hear you. But also, I will say, so I mentioned that my mom taught me how to crochet, because we love doing projects together. So it was nice for her to have a thing to do and for us to be able to do it together. we crocheted my son a baby blanket together while she was sick. It was like, different squares that we put together. And after a while, it got to the point where she actually really couldn't crochet anymore because the chemo was impacting her dexterity. So I finished the blanket by myself. And then when my son had his bris at 8 days old, my mom's best friend gave me a pillow that my mom had crocheted with her best friend, had her help her to give to me after the baby was born, because she knew that she wouldn't be here and she knew that she couldn't do the blanket anymore. And so she worked on this thing separately. And it's not words, it's not a letter, but that was her way of like saying, I know that I'm not going to be here, and like taking care of me in a really specific way. So she wouldn't have said no, like she did it in her own way. It was like such a beautiful gift.
Definitely. I think there are those moments, those gifts, those things that someone either intentionally or unintentionally leaves you.
Totally.
That you're like, wow, like they are always with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. So this is the currency of grief. So we are going to talk about a little financial topic, like the financial side of this, but just real quick, as we're on the pre-death conversations, were there any conversations around money and logistics and who's in charge and like how you want, like obviously it sounds like she worked a full career and retired 5 months before she passed, and so she probably had saved a little bit over the time, and it sounds like she wanted to travel the world. So like, did she relay some of those values to you?
Yeah. Did she relay those values to me, or did they have conversations about like what the financial situation was going to be?
Both questions.
Great. I don't think my parents never like explicitly talked about those values. They were just a part of our family. Like, my parents both worked full time. My dad still works. He works for himself. He owns his own business. My mom was an executive at her role. Like, she was a very well-respected professional. Like, they didn't like give us lessons about it, but it was just part of the fabric of our lives, understanding like saving money and working hard and, being able to spend on things that are important to you and making sure that you are spending on things that matter and not just things that like other people spend on if you don't care about the thing that other people are spending money on. But for the logistics side of it, that was really like, my parents like mentioned some stuff, but they really handled it between the two of them because my dad, was still around. And so, they like made financial arrangements for the two of them.
Understood. Is your dad in the finance field?
He's a real estate developer, but he's pretty well versed.
A main part of your story that's incredibly unique is that you were literally in the process of becoming a mother part two, I think, at the time when you were losing your mom. And so is having kids, was carrying a child, was it weird? What were the feelings that came up?
Yeah, I mean, it was really challenging. And this is like, so what are the odds kind of thing, but my husband's cousin was also pregnant and lost her dad at the same time that I was pregnant and lost my mom. And what was so interesting about it was we had such different experiences then of what it meant to be pregnant and bringing life into the world. For me, I am someone who like is very in my body. I'm a runner. I'm a CrossFit athlete. Like I like to be very physical. It's a very big part of like my emotional and mental well-being. So for me to like be pregnant and be in a pregnant body and not be able to like move or just like move the way that I want to and do things that like I wanted to do for me was really hard. Like I was still going to the gym and I was still doing that kind of stuff, but like your body is changing and you're different and you're also getting progressively more physically uncomfortable. And I think anyone who's grieving knows that like there's also a real physicality in grief. And so there was a lot of like physical discomfort, heaviness, like frustration in that. And then for me, I have like so many thoughts about this. One is I think when my mom died at her funeral, there was a lot of like, well, it's okay because there's this like ending of life, but look, there's also this beginning of life. And that was really frustrating for me because it was like one plus, like 1 minus 1 plus 1. Like these aren't, the math's not mathing here. And I was really uncomfortable with people sort of telling me like, be happy that you're pregnant because you're bringing life into this world and like that's a gift and your mom would have wanted that. Like that was not a narrative that I was super receptive to, but I got a lot of it. And when you're pregnant, you can't super hide that either. So I was going through these two like very public experiences, both of which like, I kind of wanted to do a little bit more privately. And then when Pierce was born, newborns are quite, again, physically demanding, emotionally demanding. And it was a lot of almost instantaneously becoming a caregiver, but in a completely different way again. So when my mom was sick and I was caring for her, there's a reciprocity in that. There's not a lot of reciprocity in newborns. There's a lot of giving.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
Your newborn isn't like, thank you so much for taking care of me, Mom.
Or he's like, do you want to like go do this fun activity with me?
No, change my diaper. I'm going to cry still.
Right. And so like very instantly, it was like, you need to put all of your energy into caring for somebody else again. Mm-hmm. And the abruptness of it, the like totality of it was also a lot to carry. Because again, like between growing a baby and then having a baby and then caring for a baby, there's really not a ton of space to care for yourself.
Yeah.
So all to say, for me, it was like such a challenging experience, but I've seen other people who have gone through it who have felt like they felt more of like the gift and the beauty of like the ending and beginnings than I did.
I think it's interesting because you want to create that narrative yourself and not necessarily be told how to feel. That's a big thing for those out there who are around someone who is grieving. Don't necessarily say, hey, it's okay because of X, because that may not be the way that person is feeling.
Yeah. One of the things that I teach in my workshop around how to support other people is in those moments to really stick to the facts. So the fact is you wished your mom could have met your son. The fact is like carrying a baby is challenging. The fact is your mom didn't make it to meet the baby. Like those are the things that validate what someone else is experiencing and open the door for them to then have a conversation with you around like, you're right. I did really wish that had happened this way. And now I feel all of these other things instead. And it's such an opening of a door instead of a closing of a door when you say to someone, I see your reality and I'm going to reflect it back to you, instead of saying like, yeah, that's the reality, but like, this is how you should feel about it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. So in putting this into practice, I would say, wow, the fact that your mom doesn't get to meet your child is very challenging. And then ask you, like, what are the emotions that come up? And you kind of described it.
Totally.
So what, given your main outlet of working out, which like resonates with me so much because I went on a 5.5 mile run this morning, and a lot of people who are grieving just take to running marathons or smashing plates or whatever it might be.
It's like that thing, like check in on your friends who are running marathons.
Yes, exactly. Please, someone check in on me.
Do you want to talk?
Next episode. What did you do to take care of you, to secure your own mass before you were the ultimate caregiver for many, many months, if not years?
Yeah, not much. That's honestly really not much. I I think the things that like people identify as self-care, like I continued to work out. I was in therapy, both individually and in a group. But that was really it. Like, I did not have the capacity to even care for myself. Like, it was so far out of my realm of consciousness. And I think part of it is like the acuity. You know, I haven't met a ton of people who care for themselves particularly well in the first, let's say, 6 months. And I only had 3 between my mom dying and my son being born. And in that, there's also like, I had a toddler, still have a toddler. So I was not only preparing to like start over, but I had a 2.5-year-old who also had like tons of needs and questions and caregiving to do. And that, yeah, the truth is I really didn't take care of myself very much.
Did your toddler help at all? Because is your toddler a boy?
Yeah, Simon.
Okay. Simon, did Simon, like, because Simon, you know, kids have a short memory and they want to go play all the time. So
Yeah.
was that helpful at all to kind of be around that sort of maybe positivity?
You know, I think actually one of the big blessings around having a relatively verbal child and being someone who's grieving is he would, like, you know, we told him like Nana died. We can't see Nana anymore. Nana had pancreatic cancer. Like we kept it very simple for him. Like Nana's body is in the cemetery underground. Like we kept it very like factual for him too. But kids like repeat constantly. So he like, we would be like on a walk and he'd be like, Nana's dead. And I would be like, mm-hmm. And he'll just be like, Nana had pancreatic cancer. Like randomly, he'll just like pop up with it. Or then like he went through a phase of singing a song about Nana and pancreatic cancer. And it was very triggering. But it was also in a way really helpful because it almost like smoothed the edges of that reality to me, to have someone constantly just be like, Nana died, Nana died, Nana died. And I just had to be like, yes, she did. Yes, she did. Yes, she did. It was like building the memory in myself without it being like the memory I was building alone at night, remembering like what it was like to care for her on hospice or the things that she was missing. It was so much more innocent than that because he was 3. And, you know, like didn't really get that was, I didn't love having that conversation all the time.
But also there's obviously different stages of grief and you get to a point of acceptance.
Yeah.
And when your toddler is Nana's dead, like Nana died, you kind of have to accept it a lot quicker.
Totally.
Sounds like.
Totally. And, you know, I tried to be really, you know, I tried to balance, like there were certainly times I cried about it with him in front of him, or he would look at me and we'd be sitting, he'd look at me and he would say like, are you thinking about Nana right now? And I'd be like, yeah, how do you know? And he was like, well, you just look sad. And so I tried to like bring him in those ways. And we actually have my mom's headstone unveiling this weekend. So in Judaism, you don't put a headstone on someone's grave until a year or more after they pass away. The symbolism being that like a year later, you should be able to look back with a little bit more joy than in the moment. So we have my mom's unveiling this weekend, and another practice in Judaism is leaving stones on graves instead of flowers because they represent like the permanence of the relationship that you had, but also the permanence of loss. And it's just like, you know, less fleeting. So the liturgy goes. And so this past weekend or last weekend, Simon and I painted a bunch of rocks together and we went to the park and we talked about like different things that reminded us of Nana, different things that we wanted her to see or remember or know. And we painted them on rocks and now we're going to bring them to her unveiling. And it was like such a sweet practice for the two of us to be able to sit and, you know, he was like, what's something that I like, that you like, that Nana also liked? Like, what can we all 3 like and put on one rock? So it was so sweet to like also be able to engage with him in that way now that he's a little bit older.
Yeah, that's super special and very therapeutic for both of you, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this and you are grieving and you have young children, I mean, this is a perfect example of an activity or multiple activity or ways to bring it up and bring your child into the grief. I think that's a lot healthier than trying to put on a face to that you're happy all the time,
Totally.
that and maybe explodes in a different manner or time.
And it was like very accessible. I was like, here's some paint, here's some rocks, like do whatever. And then every couple we were like, let's do a special one, and so it was no pressure. It wasn't like a big deal. It was very sweet.
Very sweet. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Was there a moment where everything shifted for you?
Yeah, I think it was right around the time I quit my job. And it was like, there was something that was just eating at me. And it was like, I finally could see myself and like the outline of the life I had lived before my mom died and myself, like they were really butting heads. And like, I could finally, I don't know what it was, but I was able to see a little bit of distance that was like, I can't keep trying to fit myself into this old life and then expect to feel differently. Like, it's like they say, like, if it hurts when you bang your head against the wall and then you bang your head against the wall, don't expect it not to hurt kind of thing. It was like, I can't expect to feel different in my body and in my life and like feel grounded or fulfilled if everything else is the same. Like, sort of like you can't be responsible for changing everything yourself, like internally,
Yeah. That's super interesting because I've found that a lot of people who have experienced loss do make a job switch and a career shift and a lifestyle transition.
50%.
Yeah, 50% of people.
50% of people who lose someone will leave their job within a year.
Wow. And I think, some of that is that because your life before is you're never going to get that back.
Totally.
And so you have to find the new normal without that person. And the old normal, it doesn't work anymore.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's exactly like why I built the coaching practice that I did, because that acknowledgement, like, we all know the 5 stages of grief are baloney at best, but like the stages of like acknowledgement, like awareness, acknowledgement, action in I can't fit my life the same way that I used to is a really hard and scary thing to grapple with, especially alone. And if you are used to being someone who is like a high functioning, high performing, high achieving person, and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't want to function, achieve, perform in the same places, in the same ways, through the same outlets, with the same relationships anymore. Like, that's really hard to step out of. And so being in a group and working through, different ways of showing up, different practices for understanding what that means, different safe spaces for asking yourself some different questions is what helps people move from feeling stuck inside an old life to taking steps to being in a new one.
That's interesting. Cool.
I like to say that like ignoring your grief is like being on a diet. So, when you're on a diet and all you can think about is the things that you're not supposed to be eating. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, I'll have a rice cake. I'll have 7 almonds. I'll have like 2 bites of yogurt. And all day you're just like, I'm really hungry. I'm really hungry. Like, I really want this other thing.
Yeah.
The end of the day ends. You don't feel nourished. You don't feel grounded. You don't feel good. But if you were to take the time and make yourself like one nourishing meal and very intentionally eat it and very intentionally prepare it and let it fuel you, that noise stops until the next time you're actually really hungry. And so when you're ignoring your grief and you're like nibbling, you're like having the rice cake or like just having that quick flash of a memory in the shower and then moving on, of course you're going to feel scattered and you're going to feel uncomfortable all the time. Versus if you're like, I am going to sit down, I'm going to let myself feel what I need to feel. Okay, I feel complete. I can move on. You have so much more space and time to not be thinking about the thing you're trying to not think about.
Definitely.
And that's like kind of what I feel like just happened to me.
Yeah, face it head on intentionally, and then like spend the time that you need, block it off, whatever you need to do, and feel all the emotions as well.
And then no, it's going to come again. It always does. But it's that like creating the space in between to then find new things to think about, do, explore new ways of being, new relationships. You don't have the space to do that when you're constantly thinking about the thing that you don't want to think about.
Yeah. So going back to when you first went back to work, and you didn't get any acknowledgement from your colleagues about your mom. And this was it the same company that she worked at as well?
No. The people who we all worked with were like sending flowers. They all came to the funeral.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. Yeah.
So not getting acknowledged. What was the bereavement policy, and what, like, in a traditional setting, if maybe there's an HR person listening to this, what would you have wanted to happen? What happened, and then what would you have wanted to happen as someone who's going through grief to feel validated?
Great question. I will start with before someone takes bereavement. So my mom was sick and she went on hospice. I reached out to our HR person and said, I'm pregnant and I need to take this bereavement leave. Like, what are my options here? Like, does one policy impact the other? Like, what do I need to know? And her response to me was like, that's really not my area of expertise. I need you to just email this inbox, like leave at, and then take it from there. The first thing an HR person needs to do is say, I will figure it out. You go be with your family. Because what happened to me was I just didn't even take bereavement officially. Like, my company had an unlimited PTO policy. They wanted me to provide a death certificate. They wanted me to like go through our like short-term disability or like third-party claims provider to take official bereavement leave. And I was like, absolutely not. That is admin that I am not taking on. But if someone at the company had said, don't even worry about it, like, go be with your family. Do you want me to call you, text you, or email you the information that you need? I will get that to you when I have it. But to put the burden on me was like the first mistake.
No.
Yes.
With zero empathy.
Totally. Like, and then never even followed up with me when I came back from leave. The other thing that I think is really important for HR folks to consider is I think that we need to do a better job in corporate America of treating a return from bereavement leave similarly to like a re-onboarding or an onboarding of somebody coming back to a company or starting at a company for the first time. You don't expect someone to show up on day one and be able to perform as if they had been at the company for years prior. You have a ramping period. You have like check-in meetings. You have peer-to-peer support. Like, you say, this is our 30, 60, 90-day plan for you to come into this company. And I think that companies need to be having similar conversations with people who are coming back from bereavement leave. Your brain is different. Like, scientifically, your pathways are different. Your cognition is different. Your ability to reason is different. And to expect someone to just dive right back in is unrealistic. And then on the same side, to expect someone to advocate for themselves and say like, hey, this is what I need, is also undue burden. People don't feel comfortable. They don't feel safe. They feel guilt, shame. They may not even want to talk about it at all. And so I think it needs to be much more like an open conversation. I like to say there should be a menu of options. So as a company, you say, here are the 10 accommodations we have for bereaved individuals. No meeting days, camera off days, 4-day work week, half day, 2 days. Like, come up with whatever the menu is that works for you. Present it to your employee and say, like, you look at this and you let me know, based on who you are, your grief, your position, what do you think you need for the next 30, 60, 90 days? And have it be like a much slower, gentler integration than like, you're on bereavement, you're back at work.
And then I think scheduled check-ins as well, or whatever you want to call it, debrief sessions, and say, instead of, I'm just imagining manager knock on your door or put some time on your calendar abruptly to say, and you not expect, or calling you and say, hey, how are you doing? Like, I don't know. Like, I just wrote this email. Like, I feel a lot of different emotions right now. Don't, like, we
Yes.
need to be able to think about this before it comes up.
And I think that that's also, that point specifically is such a good one, that when someone comes back from bereavement leave, there are two things that are happening. There's a business that needs to run 100%. Like, business is bottom line. I get that. But there are also humans who need to live their human experience. We need to be able to support both. So one is being really clear when you set up time to talk to someone. What is my intention of this time? Am I here to talk to you about work things because we have work things to talk about? Or am I here to talk to you about your personal life and like check in with you? Because similarly to what I had talked about earlier about like code switching between caretaking for my mom and then coming into a meeting, that is a huge emotional burden for someone who is grieving. To, in the breadth of a 15-minute, 30-minute conversation with a manager, talk about work products, performance, upcoming projects, and then like a casual, like, yeah, and how are you? And you're like, do you want to know? Because I'm unwell.
Yeah.
And so being really intentional around, I'm setting up this time because I would like to talk to you about some work stuff. I'm setting up a different time because I just want you to have the space to like tell me if you want to tell me things, I want to be able to be there for you and not make it about the work.
Definitely. So it's like a boundary.
Totally.
Yeah.
And just clear, like, clear as time.
Right. It's super, I'm thinking about so the last couple of months I've been caregiving for my grandmother, and I've been I've been working from her house a little bit. And there were a lot of times where, she wasn't doing well and stuff like that. And unfortunately she has passed away, but
sorry.
Thank you. And there were times where like I was like, hey grandma, like I have this meeting, like I'm going to take the meeting in your office. And I was like, should I just cancel the meeting? And like, or do I, like, how do I balance it? Do I spend time with my grandma because I know that time is fleeting? Or do I take this meeting that like I have clients, I want to take care of the families that I work with. So it's just really challenging.
Totally. And I think that that's also the kinds of things that we like tend to keep to ourselves. And I think it's also interesting because you want to believe, and for a lot of people it's probably true, but you just don't know, that if you were to say to a client, hey, I'm with my grandma, like she really needs me today and this is what's going on, that they would say, of course, go be with her. This can wait. But we aren't really set up it as a culture to like feel safe saying that. And asking those questions, even if people would give you that reception, like there's not a lot of safety in asking.
Yeah. I think it's also, we are trained to take on a lot of the high achievers are trained to take on high achieving work, and they want to do the work to the best of their possible ability. And they feel there's guilt of not doing the work. So as we transition here, your mom retired 5 months before she was diagnosed. What were, and she wanted, it sounds like her and your dad wanted to travel the world and enjoy retirement. So what was her philosophy on money, saving, planning, etc.?
I don't know that she ever had like a super clear philosophy that she would communicate. I think hard work was really important to her. And my mom always said she loved to solve problems. And so she loved to work because she loved to work. I think that as my parents got more successful in their own right, it also became really important to them to like be able to take care of us and make sure that like we were set up for success with our families. And like, both my parents were successful business people. And I think that it took them a long time to own that title. And then I think once they owned it, they felt, really proud.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And so when she did pass away, what role did you take on, and what were like the first steps that you had to do?
Yeah, I mean, in Judaism, when someone passes away, you bury the funeral is like immediate. So my mom passed away on a Saturday, and we had the funeral, I think that Monday. It was very, and like, again, she had been on hospice. So like the rabbi knew that this was coming. Like during the week that she was on hospice, we had visited the funeral home. My dad had gone and bought plots for them, but all of that happened in the 5 days before she passed away. So immediately after she passed away, it was like immediate into funeral arrangements, travel arrangements for family, you know, the funeral director and the burial plot and getting a thing in the newspaper and making sure people knew when and where the funeral was and when and where Shiva was. Like it was a lot of logistics in the first 2 days, and then in the like 3 or 4 days that we actually sat Shiva.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people, it happened with my grandmother, but a lot of people go right into the logistics side of the brain, which is, what do we do now? And yes, there are a couple things that you need to do now, but you're not going to solve all the problems now, today, and the day that she died, or the next day.
Yeah.
And so, what did you did you end up like taking on more responsibility, or did you like take a step back?
I was I was kind of at the same level of responsibility that I had been at in caretaking, and especially when she was on hospice. Sort of like my dad and I making a lot of the decisions and doing a lot of the arranging. I think because the Jewish laws are pretty clear around grief, there's also, it's helpful in a lot of ways because there are really like clear things that need to get done. And growing up Jewish, we also had like a big community of people who knew like what other things needed to happen and how to help us arrange stuff. So we took care of the funeral specifically and like her burial, but everything around Shiva or any of the other like things that we needed to think about, other people really stepped in, like not my immediate family.
Yeah,
really
a lot of
stepped
food.
Yeah, really stepped in to like just take it away from us, which was great.
That's really great.
And I think that like for me, like going back to being pregnant, it was like once she passed away, it sort of gave me permission to say, like, I'm going to take a step back now. Like, I have been in it for 8 months, like very deeply in it. And I have like a whole nother level of caretaking that I'm about to like come into. And so I need to have 3 months of caring for like only my nuclear, like, my child and my husband.
Understood. So what was the hardest financial decision that you and or your dad had to make?
I don't know that we had a lot of hard financial decisions because I think they were pretty clear. Like everything from my mom basically transitioned to my dad. But it's interesting because they did all of that arranging while she was sick. There were still a lot of things that never got sorted out. Like we never talked about my mom's jewelry is one. She has like a couple of very beautiful pieces that we never said like who gets what. Or like, does my mom want to give them to some person for a reason? Like, what does she want to do with certain things? Like, we just never had those conversations, which I think goes back to, my family not really having any of those hallmark memory conversations in general. Like, my parents are very, not academic, but those were like the less emotional conversations, or like, it was like the money, it was like this abstract, there's less of the, I want you to have, I don't know. It just was there was a disconnect between her things and her desires for those things versus just like the finance of the family.
So what did you end up doing with her stuff?
We haven't touched it.
Wow. And how long has it been?
18 months.
So what do you think the reason is that you haven't touched it?
I think, part is that my dad lives in the house still. And so that's part his, like, I feel like it's more his decision than mine or my brother's to make. He's sort of around it all the time, and it's up to him if that's bringing him comfort or pain. So that's part of it. And I think part of it is that, like, no one knows exactly. And there's a finality. That's a whole nother, like, grief experience to have, is to, like, I go to my parents' house, it looks exactly the same as it did before my mom even got sick. It feels different, but it looks the same, and so to go and then it start to look different too, that's a lot.
Definitely.
Like, my mom's shampoo is in the shower still.
That's fun.
How long did y'all wait before you went through your dad's stuff?
Relatively quickly, I would say, like, within the 4 months, because we actually ended up having to sell his home.
Oh, wow.
And so just because of, like, he had just built it, there was a large debt. We didn't have any income coming in.
Yeah.
And so we had to sell the home. And he had, like, the big thing that I think my job, given what's behind me and, like, my shirt, is, like, the sports memorabilia.
Yeah.
And so we had to go through it. What do I want? What does my brother want? Yeah. What are we going to go donate? What are we going to put on consignment to see if we can get some money? I was, like, researching, like, what is a size 18 Jason Taylor signed sneaker go for? I was like, $85. Awesome.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So it's just a lot. And it's really, I don't think there's a right answer. I think it's what feels right. But you're right. There's definitely a finality to going through somebody's stuff and throwing it away, or getting, there's services that come in and do that for you, or taking, like, donating or whatever it might be. Not having it anymore, that would be challenging.
Well, because there's the part of you that's like, I want everything.
Yeah.
And then there's the like, more rational side that's like, my mom and I didn't wear the same size. Like, there are things I'm going to take because they really remind me of her and I have to have it. But, like, I don't need her whole closet.
Yeah.
These will never get worn.
There's a couple jackets in I still have, like, his tuxedo.
Yeah.
Or there's some jackets that he had, like, in my closet, and I'm like, never going to wear it, but it's like, I have 3 jackets,
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's one of those things, I don't even know what the spectrum of normal is.
Yeah.
Like, around, like, how long people wait to go through things. It's so interesting. Like, I hadn't even thought about it as being a long or short time. I have no emotional attachment to the amount of time it's been. I have no idea what's even, like, reasonable.
Yeah. Speaking of challenging things, talk to us about those first. So the first Thanksgiving, the first family trip without your mom, the first other things that were unexpectedly challenging.
Yeah. I think the most unexpectedly challenging one for me was New Year's. I didn't feel a lot on her birthday. 4th of July is a big family holiday of ours. I was, like, 6 weeks postpartum. I didn't have the capacity to care a ton. Thanksgiving was a big family holiday of ours. We all had the stomach flu. So, like, who knows why that sucked? Could have been my mom, could have been the stomach flu. But New Year's was really hard. And for me, it was the reckoning of 2025 is the first year that my mom will never know. Like, this is the first year she never will have lived in. And that was really unexpected for me to, like, feel the weight of that very heavily.
Yeah. That's interesting because, when you're signing documents, you change the date, and it's like 1/1/2025,
right?
The new year. Wow, this is the first year that my mom won't be there. Or my dad.
Yeah, and it's like when you start to have to change your vernacular. You stop saying, like, well, this year my mom passed away. And then it starts being like last year, or it starts being 2 years ago. When you start catching yourself, like your story has to keep changing. I find that also really surprisingly challenging. And that is something I notice other people, like if you talk to a lot of people who are grieving, it's one of the first things that they'll say, like, my person passed away X years ago. There's almost always a pause of someone being like, wow, I can't believe it was X years ago.
Yeah. As we wrap up here near the end of our show, our time together, how has this experience changed the way you talk about life, talk about money, planning, legacy in your own life?
One of the things that's kind of related to the money of it that's interesting is, as I mentioned, my mom is a big crafter. I have inherited the crafting gene, and I am a big crafter. And like, yes, financially, I want to set my kids up for success. I want them to have, all the things they want in life, whatever. But I also find myself really drawn to making them things that I hope they will carry with them for the rest of their lives. So like the baby blanket, I made them stuffed animals. I've made them costumes. I've made them little bags and stuff. Like the physical memorabilia I find are like the things that I've really held on to. And then like when you think about going through someone's stuff and like, what do you keep and what do you not keep? Like I keep the things that have so much personal energy in them, that were made for someone, by someone, that really like represented who they were on a different level. I think it's been very interesting to navigate grief and early motherhood. And, obviously being a mother is such an important job, and it's such an important job, but losing my mom as I'm stepping into motherhood has also really reinforced and changed my orientation towards like the legacy of a mother and how I want my kids to know and feel about our relationship and our time. And I want them to like know me and have that connection with me, because I know for myself, but also for my brothers, how big a role our mom played in our lives, and seeing myself building that with them now, like knowing how big an impact it had on me and like our family dynamic has really impacted the way that I want our family to function. And I'm sort of a matriarch by nature. I'm okay saying that because I think my husband would agree. But I think there's also like this really important element of strengthening a whole family unit and understanding that like I can be a matriarch, but I want to know that if I weren't here, the three of them would be their own like strong unit without me, and helping facilitate that is like one of the most important parts of motherhood to me at this juncture, that I never would have really thought about had I not lost my mom and seen how that impacts like a whole family.
Yeah. It's your legacy as a mother, like you said before.
Totally.
Wow. It's important. I think both parents play a role in that.
Totally.
And it sounds like it's more prominent for you, having lost your mom and having reflected on her impact to your family, your individual, your family unit.
Well, it's also just being aware of like patterns and blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
Like every family has their patterns. Different parents have strengths and weaknesses. Different kids gravitate towards different parents. Like all of that stuff happens. And I think it just made me more aware of like where those patterns tend to crop up, and making more of an effort to fill in where I feel like I am the only one who can fill this gap. And it's my like honor and privilege to fill. And then where are the other ones where it's like, I don't need to fill this one, and how can my husband do it, or how can my son do it, or how can we do it together? And just thinking about, building a really strong unit, all of us together, instead of one person being the one who's like holding the reins.
Definitely. That's special. That's the
Yeah.
family unit. It's a team.
Yeah.
So you talk a lot about your body, movement, energy. And so how have you shifted your energy throughout this process?
Oh, dude, I've doubled down. I have a very strong community at my CrossFit gym. It's been a very healing, special place, and I've like really gone deeper on my fitness journey. I did a CrossFit competition in the spring. I'm doing another one next weekend. I'm like in my strong girl era.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. And then that brings you professionally to starting your business. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit more about Keriah.
Yeah. So Keriah Grief Coaching is my coaching practice that I started over the summer when I left my job. Keriah, I feel like I've talked about Judaism a lot in this podcast, which is sort of interesting, but Keriah is another Jewish ritual of mourning that involves tearing a piece of cloth and wearing it on the outermost layer of your clothing. And what that symbolizes is two things, and it's the two pillars of what my business is built on. One is really this like outward destigmatizing grief, and wearing it on your clothing on the outside of how you present yourself to the world is this way of saying like, I am here, this thing is happening to me, and I'm not going to hide it.
Mm-hmm.
But the other side of that is that tearing of the cloth is representative of how grief opens you up to love and support and connection from the world around you. And the two really have to go hand in hand, because if you aren't willing to say that you need the help, people can't step in to provide it. And if people don't know that you need it, people don't know that you want it, you're not going to come out and say it.
Right.
And so the two pillars of my business are really built on those two things. One is working in group and working with individuals to sort of go through some of the things that we've talked about, understanding how has grief changed who I am? How has it impacted my life? What do I want my life to look like now? And what are some steps I need to take to get there?
Mm-hmm.
Every kind of step, small steps, big steps. Like, you don't have to quit your job like I did, but you could take up bike riding and find a new love for watercolor. There's a million things you could do that nourish you that you didn't know in a nourishment that you didn't know you needed.
Yeah.
And then the other side of that is the education, specifically in the corporate space, around how do we create systems and structures for people who are grieving to feel comfortable and safe doing that while also being in a professional environment. How do we balance bottom line business and human needs? And so those are the two things that I work towards in this grief world.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And where can people find you, and who would you say would be like a perfect person to reach out and have a conversation?
Yeah. You can find me at keriahcoaching.com, which is KERIAH coaching.com. The people who I find gravitate towards me, who are drawn to my world, are those high functioning, high performing, high achieving women who are used to being in charge and being in control, and have found themselves really unsure how to do that anymore after grief, either unsure, unwilling, or unable. And they are looking for a new way to move forward.
That's
in community.
I can envision it perfectly. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Of course. And what's also amazing is 1% of all of your coaching proceeds goes toward pancreatic cancer research to hopefully find a cure.
Yes.
And that's really special. I love the cause. I mean, I love the mission, but also the cause behind it as well.
Yeah. Thank you. That was everything about Keriah has been built with a lot of intention and a lot of meaning, and a lot of care.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's really a gift for people to trust you with their grief and their grief story. And it's not a gift that I take lightly. And I want people to really feel that care when they come into my physical or virtual space.
Perfect. Well, I'll link the website in the show notes.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Be able to find you. But as we wrap up here, Sarah, I want you to imagine that there's young soon-to-be mother who's embarking on next stage of life and is also potentially going through grief and comes to talk to you. What type of grief mantras, words of wisdom would you leave that person with?
It's going to happen on your own timeline. And that's everything from grieving to feeling like yourself again, to feeling a bond with the baby, to understanding like your role as a mother, the impact of motherhood and grief and caregiving, like all of that is going to come to you on your own time. And you don't need to rush it or hold yourself back when you are ready.
Yeah. It's a very common theme here on the podcast is it's a roller coaster. Grief doesn't have a timeline. Everybody's timeline is different and the feelings are validated.
Yeah. I think in like the world of grief, that's what everyone just wants is a little bit of validation that like, this is hard.
Yeah. I also think something you said earlier about your brain is literally creating new pathways around what your new normal is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
That's also very important.
Yeah, totally. And I think, thinking about new mothers, there's a lot of talk around matrescence and how the brain changes when women give birth. But there's also a lot of research around how a lot of those same things happen when you grieve. Like your brain is literally operating differently than it did before. And I think that can help someone who's really struggling with like, why do I feel this way? And like, I'm not used to feeling this way. I'm used to being able to all these things. And it's like, well, it's not just because something happened, like your body is changing. You can't see it, but it's different than it was. And you're not going to be able to perform that way physically.
Yeah, 1,000%. And I don't know from the motherhood standpoint, but I know from the grief standpoint, I feel like a whole new person,
Totally.
Well, this has been an incredible episode, very insightful, so many takeaways for so many different people at every stage.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved having this conversation.
I appreciate it. And I loved having the conversation too. And thank you, all the people listening, for tuning in for this episode of The Currency of Grief. Just remember, it's a great day to have a great day. So go have a great day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Currency of Grief podcast. My hope is that today's conversation brought you clarity, comfort, and even a spark to start those difficult but necessary conversations in your own life. If you found this episode helpful, it would mean the world to me if you would share it with one other person who you feel this podcast could impact. And please, take a moment to leave us a 5-star review. Your review will help us reach more people who need this resource. Remember, the best time to talk about death and money was yesterday. The second best time is now. Until next time, I'm Justin Weidenfeld, your Grief Financial Officer, and this has been the Currency of Grief podcast.